Excited to look ahead to the weekend for Duke football. They've got a 3-0 record, and they're set for their first road game of the season. We've been chatting with our good buddy Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated throughout the football season. We're going to continue that here today on Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with Jase Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on this Thursday, September 21st, 2023. Hope that you're doing well. Appreciate your support of our program each and every day, talking about everything that's going on in the life of Duke athletics. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to our podcast for free wherever you get your podcast. You can also watch us on YouTube each and every day. Excited to talk about this Duke football team. They've got a 3-0 record, and they're getting set for their first road game of the season. If you haven't done so already, follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils and follow me on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Joining me on today's show, a very good friend. He is Conor O'Neill from the Devils Illustrated. Conor, I hope that you're doing well, my friend.
Not bad. We're not quite into crossover season yet with basketball started, so I'm good right now. Check in with me in a week when Duke has the basketball media availability, and we'll see then.
It's looming, right? On Monday, we have the start of basketball practice for the Duke Blue Devils, and then, of course, we've got football season plugging along. Here we are, 25% done with 3 of the 12 games completed for Duke, and we'll start by recapping this last week's game, another installment in that Duke Northwestern football series, and Duke walks away a 20-plus point victor over the Wildcats. What'd you make of their performance on Saturday?
Yeah, it was pretty dominant. Northwestern, if you're just looking at the box score, like you see that Northwestern made a game out of it, and it's a 10-point game. They took 8.5 minutes off the clock in the second quarter, and it's 17-7 at halftime. And so you see that Duke came out and kind of asserted itself in that third quarter with 2 Riley Leonard short rushing touchdowns and kind of put it on cruise control from there. It really didn't even feel that close. Like it never felt like Duke was not in control of that game. And it's just it's a Duke team that can impose its will physically. I'm not sure people are really ready for that to be said about a Duke football team. Like there are still people that want to act like they're supposed to be able to throw the ball all the time. Like I know the good Duke teams of past years have mainly been through the air, but man, this team just pounds you physically, and it's a winning recipe, and certainly worked against the Northwestern team that looked pretty overwhelmed last weekend.
How surprising do you think that is, that Duke's been such a successful rushing team?
I think it's kind of surprising to people outside the program, but inside the program, I mean, these guys love to tell us how much work they put in over the summers with David Feely. And it's 2 years in a row now that we hear it, and it can't just go in one ear out the other. I think you take everything with a grain of salt when players and coaches are talking to you in late July, early August. That's when everybody thinks they're going undefeated. But you do, when you see the fruits of the labor pay off, like when you see it actually come to fruition the way that they say it is, that's when you start thinking like, man, they actually do believe in what they're doing. They've kind of bought into the summer conditioning and summer strength programs. And, 3 games in, it's a long season. There's 9 more. But so far, you have to think that they know what they're doing in that category.
And I just think the ground game is so awesome because, to your point, when we're talking about the Duke team going into the season, a lot of praise and recognition for Riley Leonard at that quarterback spot. And then on top of that, when you look at the running back room in particular, this isn't 2 seasons ago when you've got a guy like Mateo Durant who was just so clearly a featured back. He's the guy that you want to see with the football in his hands. It's been a committee approach almost. I know Jordan Waters is kind of the elder statesman of that bunch and has really kind of stepped up for Duke, but there have been plenty of other contributions from everyone else. And, oh yeah, Riley Leonard himself gets involved in rushing the football as well.
Yeah, when you have a quarterback that can run, every coach, every offensive coordinator in the country will tell you, every defensive coordinator, more importantly, will tell you how much more difficult it is to defend offenses when the quarterback, when you have everything covered up, when you cover receivers for 5 seconds and the quarterback sneaks out of the pocket and can still pick up 20 yards on you and stiff arm and run through arm tackles and do everything that Riley can do because he's 6'4", 215 and really athletic, just makes your offense that much more dynamic. Their running backs, I think, get a little overshadowed because Riley. Yeah, it's funny. You look at the box score and it's like, oh, Riley Leonard had 97 rushing yards, and the next guy had 65 was Jordan Waters, and then Jaquez Moore had 56 yards. I've gotten to the point already where I'm trying to kind of combine the running back rushing yards because Waters and Moore are taking pretty much equal snaps, and it's not their fault. They can't control the fact that Riley is back there on every snap. Like, he's the one that gets to stay in the game. They get subbed out during drives and every other drive and that kind of thing. So running backs combined for 121 yards, at least first team offense running backs combined for 121, and Riley only had 97. It is one way to look at it, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's there. The days of Mateo Durant getting 25 to 30 carries a game. I think if I remember correctly, that last year undercut the game. I think it was against Virginia Tech. They're in October and they knew or Georgia Tech, my bad. It was Georgia Tech. They knew that was a Georgia Tech team they could beat. And they just basically said, we are going to ride Mateo Durant over and over and over. I think he wound up with like 48 carries that game. And they still lost. I will be shocked if there's ever a back-to-back game situation where any of Duke's running backs combine to get to 48 carries. In other words, I don't think like Jordan Waters or Jaquez Moore will ever have a game this year where they get 48 carries in a 2-game span. And that's what Mateo had against Georgia Tech that year. But yeah, it's a deep and talented offense at a lot of positions.
In 3 games, the offense has been really impressive for the Duke football team. The defense has only given up 28 combined points across those 3 games. But I want to talk a little bit more about the Duke football offense, the identity that we've seen thus far, and a little bit more. But first, we're going to take our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Jase Medical. Jase Medical, we're talking about the Jase case that provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jase case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctor-created, doctor-recommended. Don't be caught unprepared, as you want to make sure that you empower yourself to take care of yourself and your loved ones during the unexpected. Jase handles everything from online evaluations to licensed pharmacy, medication delivery, and ongoing consultation. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout, jasemedical.com. That is JASE Medical.com. Proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside my pal Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. So again, I teased it a moment ago. I want to talk about this offensive identity because I think at this portion of the year, looking at the calendar for Duke football, they've already got the one ACC win under their belt, but the start of the season, you're still trying to find out exactly who you are as a football team. And sometimes, Conor, in the non-conference games, knowing you've got such a long season ahead of you, you're not trying to show everybody every single thing that your team is capable. In that regard, is this something that you possibly could see for Kevin Johns, Duke's football offensive coordinator, and this offense, or do you think we've seen a little bit of it? I'm curious your take on that because I know that is a conversation some people are having right now with this Duke team, knowing they really haven't played anybody outside of that opener.
Yeah, I kind of think the whole, like, we don't want to show anything in this game. Like, I think that applies to spring games and really nothing else. With the exception maybe of the teams that open with an FCS, like Wake Forest did this year. A couple other ACC schools open with FCS teams. I think that's when you get into the vanilla stuff and you're not showing your full hand. But yeah, I mean, Duke wants to beat a Big Ten team. Like, Duke, it's not like they're building a resume for the NCAA tournament type of thing, but you want to beat the Big Ten. You want to score points for your conference, especially with where the ACC has been the last few years and kind of the perception hits that they've taken. This conference cannot afford teams to just kind of mail it in and relax in those types of games. So I get the question. I get where you're coming from, and I get where fans would think that. I kind of think that you don't hold anything back when you have these types of games. I do think there's more to Duke's passing game than we've seen so far. I also think that their offense has been a little bit of, well, if we can run the ball, we're up 2 and 3 touchdowns. Let's just keep running the ball.
Yeah.
We're getting 8 to 10 yards a carry. It's kind of the old adage, like the baseball adage of one or two true outcomes. Like, when you run the ball, there's not much bad that can happen, especially when, it's a little misconceded now, but I don't think that's the right word. But Duke running backs lost fumbles in the first 2 games of the year, which kind of shoots down this theory, but Duke running backs lost 1 fumble all of last year. Like, ball security is something Duke does very well. So if you're running the ball, in theory, you're not going to turn the ball over. And so the only way you let teams back into a game from when you're up 2 to 3 touchdowns is by committing turnovers, essentially. So if so facto, like this is where you get chicken and egg thing, but if you're running the ball, you're not turning the ball over, you're winning, is where I'm trying to go there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you're kind of shifting where I was going to go with the question that I was talking about. Obviously, taking care of the football is what you want to do. And then you mentioned kind of the passing game element. Like, if there's something that hasn't necessarily been on full display, it would be the passing attack, because there hasn't been a need to throw the football when you are so effective on the ground game and whatnot. And it's so wild that that's all we were really talking about going into the season was, hey, Riley Leonard is a great quarterback. He's got some guys that you're going to know make plays in the passing game and whatnot. So I guess maybe when does that become more of a thing? Is it jumping back into conference games? What exactly does that look like in regards to Leonard and just how we perceive the Duke passing game in 2023?
I'm interested to see if it happens this week with UConn, just from the standpoint of UConn is coming off a game where they only gave up 80 rushing yards. And I think at some point, some team is going to stop Duke on the ground. I don't think Duke is going to run for 240 yards in every single game this year. They're not a triple option. They're not a service academy.
As amazing as that would be.
Like, at some time, I don't know when it's going to be, but at some time, Duke is going to have to throw the ball to win a game and create explosives offensively without gashing teams on the ground for, the 20 and 30 yard runs and what we've seen there. I don't know if it's going to be UConn. I think UConn probably has a better front 6 or 7 players than Northwestern did. They're stout. They just showed that in the last game against FIU. Obviously, Duke's offensive line, you would like to think, is better than FIU's offensive line. Where I think it's more likely is Notre Dame. Like, I think that's the one where, without having to stack the box, I think Notre Dame has the athleticism, has the size to stop Duke in the running game. And that's where we might see, that's where that might be like the brass tacks moment of, okay, can Jalen Calhoun and Jordan Moore win battles one-on-one to get open and get separation? Can Riley Leonard make throws under duress? I think that's probably going to be the first time we have to see it this year.
Duke football will play their first road game on Saturday against UConn, 3:30 Eastern time. You can watch the game on CBS Sports Network. We've talked a lot about the offense. Let's focus on what this Duke defense is capable of, what we've seen through 3 games, and what's coming. And we'll continue that conversation after our final timeout here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Birddogs, one of my absolute favorite products. I'm always wearing Birddogs because they make you look good. They make me look good. These stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Birddog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. Why do they fit way better? Well, that's because regular shorts are made of stiff, restricting cotton, but Birddogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Birddogs are functional for any occasion, whether it's golf, a date, an evening out, working out, work in the office, whatever it may be. Birddogs is what you should be wearing. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for a free Birddogs water bottle when you order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you that. Final few moments here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my pal Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. All right, what's going on at duke.rivals.com these days, my friend?
We've got I'd like to think it's a good story on Miles Jones, 7th-year corner from Texas A&M, who we had some fun joking with on a Zoom. We heard before the season about the other defensive players calling him grandpa when they learned that he was one of the 25 oldest players in college football. So I wanted to know if he had a little more respect on his name with 2 interceptions and 2 PBUs in 3 games. And the spoiler there is no, like he does not. He still mess with him, but that's the latest feature. We'll have an in-depth preview of the game up. We've got a 5 things to know about UConn, in which I like to think it's educational and also brings up the greatest coaching contract in sports history. If you're unfamiliar with that and the deal that Randy Edsall had, go check it out. A lot of good stuff to get you primed for football games over there.
I love that. We're excited. Go check it out, duke.rivals.com. I'm certainly excited for this game coming up on Saturday for Duke, and I'm excited to talk about the Duke defense because, boy, have they been pretty lights out through the first portion of the season. The 7 points on the scoreboard streak ultimately came to a close this past weekend as we got later into that game, but still only giving up 2 scores. What have you thought of their performance through 25% of the season?
Yeah, we're going to have to, for you, you're going to have to find a way to talk around it. For me, I'm going to have to write around it. The fact that the last 7 points that Northwestern threw up there, I don't know if there was a starter on the field for Duke's defense. Like they're
throwing off the averages, man. Yeah.
Yeah, there were some guys on the field that were just getting their, they're freshmen. They're able to play 4 games plus the postseason. So it's best to get them out there and get them experience when they're not playing the FCS school or somebody that they're rolling over. But man, it's a really good defense. It's funny if you start on the back end and look at the secondary. Like, I think the 3 best players in the secondary might be the 3 smallest players on the team when you talk about scholarship guys, because Jalen Stinson, Brandon Johnson, and Chandler Rivers are not big and imposing guys. Like, they're not gonna win any off the bus medals, but man, they all hit really hard. They're all so instinctual. I'm starting to beat the drum. I don't think people understand how good Brandon Johnson is. I mean, he plays such a demanding position. Nickel is the second hardest position in football to play right now, other than quarterback. It's just, you not only have to stand in there against pulling offensive linemen and tight ends that are trying to block you and run in the run game, but you also got to cover every team sticks their small, shifty, fast guy in the slot. And then that nickel has to not only hold up against run support, but also guard that shifty guy. So he's in my mind, he's the MVP of this defense. He kind of makes everything go around him. He's also one of the best pass rushers on the team, which is crazy to say about a guy who's 5'10", 190. But that's where you are in the secondary. We know about the defensive tackles, right? Like you know what you're getting out of Dwayne Carter. You know what you're getting out of Jameon Franklin. Aeneas Peebles is really kind of one of the unsung heroes. Like we heard of late in fall camp, like he had taken a next step, and him being able to rotate in with Dwayne and Jameon, kind of spell them and make sure their snap counts don't get too high, especially now early in the season. That's been pretty critical. So he deserves some love there. They're getting some production from defensive end. I still think they want a little more. They're still looking for next steps out of Vincent Anthony Jr. and Wesley Williams. RJ Oben is giving them some decent pass rush, but it's a matter of it's better than it was last year, because last year was pretty poor. It's still not quite to where you would want it to be if you're looking to have an elite college defense. They're getting good play out of the linebackers. Dorian Mausi is the one that comes to mind. Like he struggled last year with injuries. He was not healthy, and he showed it. Like it was clear. You watched him on a bad defense in 2021, and he stood out because he was making plays. And you think, okay, he's going to be better because he has better coaching. And last year it didn't come together. Well, last year he was hurt. He was dealing with, I think it was a neck injury and a foot injury. It was some combination of those where he just wasn't right. And you're seeing in year 2 of the coaching staff, not year 2 of the defensive coordinator, but year 2 is a lot better for him because he's healthy. I think he was Duke's leading tackler in the last 2 games, both. So he's been better. Trey Freeman is coming on. Like we've been telling you about Trey Freeman since like a year and a half ago in the spring, and he's finally kind of putting it together. It's a defense that should enable them to win some games this year.
Well, they've already won 3 of them. We'll see if they can make it 4 on Saturday and keep climbing as they dive back into the ACC schedule. Of course, coming up next Saturday, September 30th, that massive game from inside Wallace Wade Stadium, a nighttime kickoff under the lights when Notre Dame comes to town. So we're going to have plenty of conversations leading up to that big game for Duke next weekend. But before that, they've got to take care of business this weekend against the Huskies. On average, you look at the folks in Vegas, they see this kind of being a 3-score game in Duke's favor. I mean, how are you feeling about what Duke's going to be able to do? First road game, so some freshmen and the younger guys are having to get used to just, hey, what is it like to travel on the plane? Well, what does that look like staying in a hotel the night before? All those kind of outside variables and whatnot. But ultimately, I mean, how comfortable should Duke feel in a game like this, Connor?
I think pretty comfortable. I mean, I know I'm setting myself up for a jinx there, and some fans might be mad at me if things go the wrong way this weekend. I think this is a driven team. I think this is we're 16 games in. We're the old NFL schedule into Mike Elko's tenure as Duke's coach. And I think there might be one game that you could look at and say they didn't show up mentally. And that was last year's loss at Georgia Tech, which I get it. Like that was a bad start. Duke didn't really come alive until the 4th quarter. They also had a bunch of injuries they had to deal with in the first half. They had Shaka Hayward get thrown out with a targeting penalty. It just had a lot of things go wrong and go haywire during that game. So I would kind of take issue if you said like that was the game they didn't show up mentally because they had other things go wrong. I think this is a coaching staff that is able to keep this team dialed in and focused.
Connor, as always, it is so amazing to have you here with us on the program. Duke.rivals.com. Go check out your work there at Devils Illustrated. And I look forward to talking to you again next week, okay?
Sounds good, JJ.
All right, that's Conor O'Neill joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, and that's going to do it for our show here today. Go check out his work, Duke.rivals.com. It's really impressive stuff. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.